Tafshin Mem Vav. That year, Shabbos Parshas Vayetze was a Yud Kislev. So the Rebbe is connecting, is going to be speaking primarily about the Mittler Rebbe, whose Chag HaGeula is on Yud Kislev when he was released from imprisonment, and also make a little bit of reference also to the fact that on Tes Kislev, which is Friday, is the also the birthday and the yahrzeit of the Mittler Rebbe, and he's going to connect this with Simcha, the idea what the Mittler Rebbe was about, and his Chassidus has to do with the idea of Simcha, and also we're going to bring at the end of the Sikha the connection of Parshas Vayetze with Simcha as well. We're going to skip around a lot at the beginning of the Sikha, where it's just like more of an introduction until he finally gets to the idea of Simcha with the Mittler Rebbe. So we're going to skip down to the bottom of the first page, 3 paragraphs from the bottom of the page. It's explained in the words of Arabim Arnesim Shadmor Hazakim, who Inyan HaChachma, the Alter Rebbe, was the idea of Chachma, Admurem Tzoi Balagul Yud Kislev, and the Mittler Rebbe, whose day of redemption was on the 10th of Kislev. This year, it's going to be on the Sunday. If I remember correctly, Shabbos is Tes Kislev. Who Inyan Bina, it's the level of the idea of Bina. Hainu Shal Yodei Ba Teres Achsidus Ba Chabad Ba Ifim Shal Archava. The idea of Bina is that it develops and broadens the point of Chachma, and that's the same thing which the Mittler Rebbe did. He brought the teachings of Chabad in a way of broadness. That is the uniqueness and novelty of Bina over Chachma. Through Bina comes the point of Chachma in a way of broadness, like a raging a broad river. Like we actually see with our senses. You open up a mimer of the Mittler Rebbe, the teachings of Chassidus, the Mittler Rebbe, is in a way that's broad. Ribi Godel Bakamos, a lot literally written in comparison to the Alter Rebbe's Chassidus. And then the Rebbe goes on to say, it's not just quantitatively that there's more pages to a mimer of the Mittler Rebbe, but also qualitatively. When there is a lot in the quantity, it also impacts the quality and elevates it. Let's skip the brackets, the 2 lines from the bottom of the page. Even more so, the primary thing is the increase in quality. In all matters, the spirit has to be more valuable than the body. Haruchnius halagashmius, which means the spiritual over the physical. Ha'eches halakamas, the quality over the quantity. We're going to skip over 2 pages at this time, to the bottom or close to the bottom of the 3rd page over here, or the 4th page. And he says, in Ois Daled, last 2 paragraphs on the page, according to us, understood the lesson and the empowerment that we can take from the 10th of Kislev concerning our actual service. Since, as we mentioned earlier, that idea what the Mittler Rebbe stood for is the broadness of the river, the expansion of Teres of Chassidus, movement, it's understood. When we find ourselves on the 10th of Kislev, the day of redemption of Mittler Rebbe, there is a lesson and an empowerment, to increase with much more power, much more strength in all matters of the teachings of Chassidus, in the way of the broadness of the river. The intention of this is both concerning a person himself. To study Chassidus in a way of a great amount and broadness, both quantitatively and qualitatively. Ad l'archava ba'ifin sha'archavis hanar, till a broadness in the way of the broad river. V'hein b'negeyim lezulas. And also concerning another, Hainu afot samayonis chutza, spreading the well springs outward. Shekein ha'inyan di yafutza mayasar chutza, the idea of your well springs should be yafutz. Yafutz means hu inyan the rechavis hanar. Yafutz means like it like explodes. It's like spreading all over the place. The broadness of the river. Hainu shamayonis. This means that the well springs einam nisharim kaimam do not remain in their place. They come in a way of spreading and broadening. The broadness of the river, in every place, till the place that's considered as so far and outside. Let's skip down to Ois Hey, that's 4 paragraphs on the bottom of the page. From the idea of broadness in Torah study of the Chassidus of the Mittler Rebbe, to idea of the broadness in action, Hamaisu or Iker, action is primary, and by prefacing. All matters of Torah come out expressed also concerning action and matters of the world. Like it says, that when Hashem created the world, he looked in the Torah, and he created the world. So the world and Torah are interconnected. What does it mean in our service of Hashem? The fact that Hashem looked in Torah and created the world. That matters of Torah has to permeate and express in all the specific matters of our day-to-day life. Not only does matters of Torah express itself in matters of holiness, but also in matters of non-obligatory things, through our non-obligatory things, through things that are not mitzvahs, we fulfill the avodah that in all your ways you should know him. So you have things that are not obligated to do according to Torah, but you can still fulfill, and you're still supposed to fulfill what we've been enjoined to, that in all your ways you should know him. And at least all your actions should be for the sake of heaven. If these matters are said concerning the service of every single Yid, surely this matter is emphasized even more by a Nasi. That idea of the broadness of the river in the teachings of the one whose redemption is on Yud Kislev B'chol Shara in Yonim has to express itself in the matter of broadness in other matters as well, as the Rebbe is going to explain what that broadness is. That broadness is the idea of joy and happiness. Let's skip over to the 4th paragraph from the top of the page, the next page. There's a general matter of action. Then that is expressed the general matter of the broadness of the river of Bina, Inyan Simcha, the idea of joy, as we will explain how and what's the connection between the broadness of the river of Bina with joy. Oizvav, the explanation of this matter is Spheres HaBina Kshura Inyan Simcha. The sphere of Bina, which we said is what the Mittler Rebbe's teachings was about. The Alter Rebbe was Chachma, we began the Sikha, and the Mittler Rebbe was Bina. Bina is connected with Simcha. Like it says in Hallel, the mother of the children rejoices. Who is this mother of the children? Eim Habanim, the mother of the children. Koyal Bina is referring to Bina. Gimavur, Betani Betchilas. So let's explain at the beginning of Tanya and Perek Gimel, Shechachma Bina, Eim Ava Eim. That Chachma and Bina are likened to father and mother. Shemehem Neiladim Banim, that from the father and mother children are born. Shivas HaMidas, the 7 Midas. So therefore, Eim Habanim, the mother of the children, which is Bina, has to do with joy, with smecha. And then the Rebbe connects it also with the Parsha of the week, even though later that this particular idea of Ema Bonim Smech has to do with Parshas Vayetze. Later he's going to make a general connection of Simcha with Parshas Vayetze. We can connect this idea with the Parsha of the week of the Shabbos, Parshas Vayetze, Shabon Nemar Shem Hagdoila Leah. It says the name of the older one, of the bigger one, was Leah. So the Koi Albina. So Chassidus explains that Hagdoila, the word Hagdoila, is referring to Bina. Hagdoila can be separated into two words, as if it says Hey Gedoila, the large Hey, meaning there's two Heys in Yud Kei Vav Kei. The older Hey, if you will, of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the higher Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, goes on Sfiras HaBina. Yud Kei is Chachma and Bina, Vav Kei is the six Midas and Malchus. So Leah has to do with Bina. And she also, Leah, has to do with the idea of the Simcha of the children. Ubehemshcha Parsha Mesuper. And over the Parsha Vayetze, it's related. Shaleah Yolda Shisha Banim. That Leah gave birth to 6 sons. V'achar kach Yolda Bas. And afterwards, she had a daughter. The Koi al Shivas HaMidas Shenoldim Bina. It's referring to the 7 Midas that come from Bina, Shisha Banim Zah. The 6 sons has to do with Zeir Ampin according to Kabbalah. Ubas, and a daughter is brought down always of Chassidus, has to do with the feminine, with Malchus, which is the level of the feminine. So going back to the mother of the children, that the mother of the children rejoices and is happy. The idea of joy is applicable primarily to the mother of the children, Bina, which is the sphere of Bina. And from her, from Bina, comes down the joy also to the children. It's the nature of the offspring, the children, that they have all the matters that their fathers and mothers have. To such a degree, it's not even dependent upon their choice. So therefore, since the mother of the children has the idea of Simcha, so automatically the children are also, it's communicated to them the idea of Simcha. V'yesh lahoisiv, the Rebbe says we can add 3 paragraphs in the bottom. Also, the nature of Bina, that's the broadness of the river, is also connected to the idea of joy. The reason why, one of the characteristics that express the idea of joy, or one of the characteristics that's natural and a result of joy, is Simcha poiretzes geder, that Simcha breaks through barriers. When it says it breaks through a barrier, not it stops the barrier, it ceases the barrier. This means even after there is the breaking through, there is a barrier, there is a enclosure, there is a fence, but the barrier is broken through. Skip the parentheses. Muchach. So this means, obviously, if the barrier remains, if this fence remains, so we must say, the intention over here is not an unwanted type of barrier, a barrier and a limitation of klippus chas v'shalom. Because such a type of barrier, you have to completely nullify it, not just to break it through. Surely we must say that we're talking about a barrier and a limitation that Kedusha puts into place. V'afal became still in all mitzad ma'alosa shel simcha, because the quality and advantage of joy, it has the capability to break through the barrier and the limitations, even that there is in Kedusha. In other words, even good barriers it breaks through. And that's why the barrier still remains, because it's something good, but we still have to break it through. That's the connection with the broadness of the river. When we break through the barriers and the limited measure of holiness, then we come to a state and situation that's beyond any measure and limitation, the ultimate broadness. Like, for example, just the Alter Rebbe was Chachma and the Mittler Rebbe was Bina. It was the same Chassidus, but to a certain degree, in comparison, the Alter Rebbe's Chassidus was limited in comparison to the Mittler Rebbe's Chassidus. So it wasn't a bad thing, Chas Shalom, it was Chassidus. But breaking through the barriers, the broadness of the river, means we, even in the Kedusha, we made it so much greater. So the Rebbe says in Oy Zayin, Al Piza move on, Shin Yonish Balagul, Yud Kislev. It's understood that the idea of the one whose redemption is on the 10th of Kislev, Rechavis HaNor de Bina, the broadness of the river of Bina, skip the parentheses to the end of the line, Tzarech Lisbate, Gam B'Maisav, Apoyel Mamish Min Simcha, has to be expressed also in action, Mamish, in the idea of joy. According to what we said, that the redemption of the 10th of Kislev affects an advantage and an increase in the broadness of the river of Bina itself. So it's understood, there's also concerning the idea of joy. In addition to the joy and breaking through barriers and boundaries, because the general idea of the Mittler Rebbe, whose Geula is on Yud Kislev, in the joy itself, in the breaking through the barrier itself, one has to increase in a way of being redeemed from any limitations in that joy and in that breaking of barriers. And simple words and simple language. Standing on the 10th of Kislev, the day of the redemption of the Mittler Rebbe, that is about the broadness of the river of Bina. One has to add an increase in more power, more strength, in all matters of joy. Skip the parentheses. Simcha shel Torah, Simcha shel Mitzvah, Simcha of Torah, and Simcha of a Mitzvah, Adlo Simcha binyan Ereshus, until even rejoicing in optional things and permitted matters. Like we said before, all your actions should be for the sake of heaven, and in all your ways you should know Him. We'll move on, and it's understood. All the above mentioned concerning the idea of joy, Shaykh Chol Echad ve'Echad miYisrael, is applicable to every single Yid, B'chol Maimed Matzah, in every state and situation, Gam Lepotchut Sheb'Pshutim, also to the most ordinary Jew. Ubagdam, by prefacing, Duber Kama Pomim Oides Klolos in Nasimcha, was spoken about many times about the general idea of joy, B'meshach Kol Hashana Chula, throughout the entire year. One does not have to search for special reasons. Why should I be happy? Because every single day, immediately at the beginning of the day, every single Jew says, I thank you, the King that lives and exists, that you return to me my neshama. It's understood and also obvious to every single Yid, even the most ordinary Jew. The great joy in the matter. Hashem, the living and existing King himself, his very self, leaves behind all of his involvements, and he turns and he pays attention to return the Yid's neshama. Like we said before, this takes place on a daily basis, even before we know about what will be the great quality and specialness of this particular day. Much more so. When in the joy there's added something more so because the special quality that the day has. And in our case, the day of the Yom HaGeula, the day of the redemption of Shalad Tzoyv, the Mittler Rebbe, like even again an ordinary Jew understands, in this day was a very great rejoicing because the redemption of Mittler Rebbe. And this holds true even if someone doesn't know how wonderful and how great and how auspicious it is, the broadness of the river, of the great thing of the Mittler Rebbe. Just the very fact that the Mittler Rebbe got out of prison is enough to cause an increase in joy. These words are aimed L'chol echad v'achas misrael, to every single Jewish man and woman, anoshim v'noshim, men and women. Shekein ha-simcha de bina em abanos meicha nimsheches gam labanim, because the simcha of bina, which is the mother of the children she rejoices, comes down also to the sons, Shisha, like we said, the 6 ones, and banim ubas, the sons and the daughter, both concerning men and sons, also concerning women and daughters. So the Rebbe now asks an interesting question. Simcha, what are you making a big deal about the day of Simcha on Yud Kislev? We have a certain day that's meant for Simcha. That's a Simcha of Simchas Torah, or the Zman Simcha Seinu of Sukkot. The Rebbe says, there's still room to ask a question. You do, it's known and explained in many places. The main idea of joy is connected to the time of our rejoicing in the month of Tishrei. From Tishrei, we take an empowerment for the idea of joy. The entire year, the fact that we are rejoicing with our Torah study and we're rejoicing and are doing mitzvahs on a day in Cheshvan, a day in Shvat, it all comes out of the time of our Simcha in Tishrei. The Rebbe says, this is actually hinted in the Rambam, that Tishrei is the date that supplies the joy for the rest of the year. Like it's also hinted in the words of the Rambam, that the halacha where the Rambam teaches us about the great quality of rejoicing in the service of Hashem. The rejoicing that a person should rejoice in doing a mitzvah is a very great avodah. Kasva b'soiv hilchas lulav. He wrote it at the end of the laws of lulav, behemshech l'simcha yisera de chag HaSukkos, when he's talking about the excess joy that's supposed to be on the Yom Tov of Sukkos. The Rebbe says in the brackets, within the brackets, that the fact that there's a lot of things derived from where the Rambam, not just the fact that the Rambam said certain halachas, but the Rambam was very exact where he placed certain halachas. And sometimes we will find certain things about certain mitzvahs placed somewhere else. I'm not going to go into it right now. We find it concerning Shofar and Tshuva, we find it concerning Shabbos lights and Chanukah. The very placement, the Rebbe says, that we are placing the general need to serve Hashem with Simcha. The Rambam puts it specifically by Hilchas Lulav. There's a place, a different section of the Rambam where the Rambam talks about different character traits that a person has to have in the service of Hashem. That's called Hilchas Deis. Talks about not getting angry and being humble, different things. That would have been more, maybe, a place to talk about Simcha as well. But the Rambam chooses to put the obligation of Simcha in the laws of Lulav, at the end of the laws of Sukkot. How come? So the Rebbe says, 2 lines from the end of this paragraph, from the end of the final brackets, L'ram is to hint, Shanesinas koyach l'simcha shel mitzvah b'chol hashana kula, that the empowerment for the joy of a mitzvah throughout the year, he mizman simcha seinus, from the time of our rejoicing on Sukkot. That's why the Rambam puts the obligation to be joyous anytime we do a mitzvah by the laws of the time of our Simcha. So the Rebbe now concludes what he started asking. If so, the question arises: what room and what need is there to emphasize the idea of joy so much? Skip the parentheses, Biyud Kislev Davka, specifically on the 10th of Kislev. It's something that has to do with the Zman Simcha Seinu, and from that it goes to the rest of the year. So the Rebbe says, Parshas. The explanation of this is very simple. When we're found the month of Tishrei, we emphasize we emphasize that the main idea of joy is in the time of our Simcha, in the month of Tishrei. That's what our focus is. On Tishrei, we're focused on Tishrei. And from the time of our rejoicing on Tishrei, in other words, Sukkot and on, comes about and is drawn down joy for the rest of the year, kula, entirely. Despite the truth of that, when we find ourselves in a unique day in the middle of the year, in the case in question now, we're finding ourselves Yud Kislev, the day of the redemption of Mitler Rebbe. Hare Adrabi, even more so, in Yom Shel Yom Zeh, the idea of this very day. Had Goshes in Simcha, the emphasis of the idea of rejoicing. Emabonim Smecha, the mother of the children who is rejoicing by official pritzes gather in a way of breaking through barriers, or Chayvus Anar, the broadness of the river. Ad La'ofen Shel Geula, until the idea of redemption. Nase Shar, it becomes a gate and a channel. Through this gateway, through this channel, we enter and we rise up and we illuminate, skip the parentheses, all matters of the service throughout the entire year. Both the matters prior to Yud Kislev, including also the time of our rejoicing in the month of Tishrei, and also the matters that will take place after Yud Kislev. So Yud Kislev, being that it has something special about joy, will be the means and the gateway and the channel for bringing joy everywhere else, and the rest of the year, backwards and forwards. Not only that, since the idea of the 10th of Kislev is the broadness of the river, moving, it's understood. Also, the fact that he's a gateway to all matters of service in a way of broadness, a broad entrance, a broad gateway. Through that day, through the day of the 10th of Kislev, is affected a broadness in all matters and the rest of the matters of the service of the entire year. Let's skip over to let's read on further. More like we said before, since Yud Kislev comes out only once a year, it influences all the days following Yud Kislev, Ad Yud Kislev b'Shana Haba, until the following 10th Kislev in the next year in Tavshin Pei Zayin. Like all Yom Tovim, their influence keeps on going till the next year when we will have that very same Yom Tov again. So the Rebbe is going to explain something very interesting. The reason why it ends when it hits the next year is not because of lack of capability, that it weakens and like gets exhausted by the time and used up by the time next year comes around. Not at all. Like we've spoken about many times, it's not because he doesn't have the capability to influence a longer amount of time. He can only influence for a year and then is used up. Because all matters of holiness are in a way that's unlimited. Much more so the idea of joy, that the content is breaking through barriers. And therefore, for sure, the joy of Yud Kislev could last more than just a year till the following Yud Kislev. Therefore, for sure, it has the capability to influence in a way that's unbounded. Elam should be Yud Kislev, the Shana Haba, in the Yud Kislev of the next year. Nifalim, Kol Inyanim Elu B'Ofen Na'ali Yoser. All these matters are affected in an even higher way. Bli Gvul Gam Legabe Bli Gvul Shana Zu. It's like infinite, even comparison to infinite of this year. So that's why the influence of this year stops when we reach the Yud Kislev next year, or the influence of Purim stops when we reach Purim next year, not because it was exhausted, the influence, but because we have now a greater level next year. Then the Rebbe concludes, actions was primary. We have to increase in the matter of joy. Simcha shel Torah, Simcha shel Mitzvah, the joy of Torah and the joy of a mitzvah. Simcha b'chlal, and joy in general. B'yeser seis, b'yeser rois, with more power and more strength. Or Parshas, and simply put, Simcha b'ofen mefazim of charker, joy in a way of dancing and jumping. Or b'zagufa b'cholois, and this itself, like it says by David HaMelech, and the Rambam quotes it with all of his might. B'ofen shalamaylam kol medida v'agbola, in such a way it's beyond all measure and boundary. Va'ad la'ofen shal geula filo l'gaba simcha pritzes gadu d'rechovis anor d'bina, in such a way that it's like redeemed from, out of the limitations of the joy and breaking through the boundaries of the broadness of the river of Bina. Like we said before, to bring this into further effect in the days following that. Let's skip over the next page. Ois Yud, 3 paragraphs on the bottom of the page. V'yiratzon should be the will of Hashem. Simcha Gedoy Lazur, this great joy, Tifritz Kol Agdorim, will break through all barriers. First of all, Bittul Kol Agdorim, the Heipach Kedusha, it will nullify all the barriers of the opposite of Kedusha. Hainu, this means Shekol in Yonam Enias V'Kuvim Chuvlu Misbatan Lagamri. All matters of obstacles, etc., become totally nullified. Until there's no remnant and mark and impression left from it whatsoever. But just the opposite. It's the way they were, to the degree that they were afflicting them, in other words, the way Yidden were being afflicted in Mitzrayim, to that degree they will increase and they will burst forth. So the Rebbe says an interesting thing, that in this expression you have 2 sides of the coin. In this itself, there's emphasized 2 extremes. On one hand, we forget totally until there's no impression left from the untoward thing. As long as we remember what happened, then there can't be the increase and bursting forth in its true manner. Along with that, since even in the untoward thing, in the negative thing, there's a spark of holiness, that through that spark of holiness embedded in it, that adds an advantage and quality in matters of holiness. So it'll increase, so it'll birth forth a great elevation in comparison to the level before the descent. To such a degree that it's such a great advantage that we're going to get from it, that it was worthwhile the descent, in a way that in a small moment I have left you. To that should be the advantage of, so he will increase and so he will burst forth. So in addition to bursting and breaking all the barriers of Klippa, the Rebbe says on the next page, in addition to that, Pritzas Agdorim, the Kedusha, to break through all the dividers and categories and the paradigms of holiness. Means in addition to the fact that all matters of holiness are complete. We break through the barriers of completion and perfection of holiness, and we add even more so in the way of the broadness of the river. It says about Yaakov Avinu, the Chazal say, it says Faratz to Yom V'Kedma. We're going to talk about that later. That it's an inheritance without boundaries, not like Avram and Yitzchak, where Hashem described the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael to them. But Parshas, and simply put, we merit the fulfillment of what was foretold. Hashem will broaden your boundaries. This means in addition to the idea of perfection, completion in all matters of holiness, beginning from the perfection and the redemption, the true and complete redemption, and even specifically the complete land. A land that constantly the eyes of Hashem Elokecha is in it from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. Skip over to the next line after the parentheses. Shleimus Ha'am, the completion and perfection of the nation. B'nareinu v'zkaneinu g'ayim b'naneinu v'naseinu, with our youth and our elderly, with our sons and our daughters. V'kaspom azavim itam, our silver and gold with them. Hein kesef zav ruchnim, both spiritual silver and gold, which is av v'yira, love and awe of Hashem. Shoyrish kol ha'machmet t'sesa v'shamit sloisa. The Alter Rebbe says that love is the root for all the 248 positive commandments, and awe is the root for all 365 negative commandments. Shleimus ha'Torah mitzvah, the perfection and completion of Torah and its mitzvahs, ve'en kesef v'zav gashmim, and also it'll include that we will go along with our physical silver and gold, because the silver and gold in the physical world comes as a result and a chain descent from the spiritual silver and gold, which is love and awe. So nifal bekulam inyan shel archava, in all of these matters, shleimus ha'am, shleimus ha'aretz, the money, the Torah mitzvahs, the aviyira, everything, they're all expanded. Yarchiv Hashem Elokecha's gvul chadar. Hashem will broaden your boundaries. Rechayvus hanar, the broadness of the river. Nachla b'li mitzarim, a inheritance without boundaries. V'aschol b'zeh, the beginning of this is Shagambi me gols achroinim, also in the final days of Golos. Zeichen kvar l'archava b'chol inyanim. We merit the right to broadness in all matters. Boneh chayim mezoyin revicha b'kol revicha, children, life, and sustenance in a comfortable way, meaning all of them will be comfortable. And how much more so do we merit the broadness in all matters that's connected to the avoid of spreading the well springs outward. Through this we speed up and affect the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. The master, this the King Mashiach, is going to come speedily in our days. Mamish. We're going to skip over to the next part of Farbrengen, where the Rebbe connects Simcha with the idea of the Parshas Vayetze. And the Rebbe was speaking about that Vayetze is about leaving behind who he is and his involvement in material things, and to be involved in holiness. So we'll skip down to the two paragraphs on the bottom of the page. Ois Yud Ches. Or actually, let's go down to the last paragraph. Yitzia mitis, true going out, shayeches raka shayetzia mitoch simcha, is only applicable when you're going out of joy. You're not being coerced, you're not being forced. One is going out of their own goodwill. Out of knowledge, that this going out is for his benefit. Then he goes out in joy. Because if he would not be going out with joy, if he's going out under duress, under coercion, since he on his own wants to stay in his previous state and not go out, even when he's actually going out because he is forced, this is not a true leaving, it's only external. It's, in other words, his body might be leaving, but his mind, his heart, his soul, his interest, his focus is still in the original place. V'gam inyan zeh yitzia mertzoyne ad liyitzia matech simcha. Also, this idea, going out of a person's own free will until he's going out of a state of joy, mudgish betoichem Parshas Vayetze, is emphasized in the content of Parshas Vayetze. That it says, Parshas told us, we're already told at the end of the previous Parshas told us about Yaakov leaving, which is the question. So why does it have to say again in our Parsha? It says, Vayishma Yaakov that Yaakov listened to his father and mother that told him to go find a wife in Haran, by his relatives Lavan, and he listened to them and he went. So already spoke about him leaving. So why does it start the parsha again? Vayetze Yaakov Beershava, because the last parsha we were talking about Yaakov doing it because he was told to do it. In this week's parsha we're talking about Yaakov doing it of his own volition. In the pasuk of last week's parsha is emphasized that his going out and his traveling was because the command of his father and his mother. In other words, he was forced to do so. He had to fulfill the request of his parents. That's the novel or the new thing of Parshas Vayetze. Vayetze Yaakov Beershava V'el Charana, that Yaakov went out from Beershava and he went to Haran. Yitziyasa Shal Yaakov Atzmai. Yaakov himself leaving, not being told to leave. K'loimer mertzoynei atoiv, out of his own free will. L'lo yisarvusei shel mitzvah without the mixing in of anyone else. V'lo yoid al shavayisa Yaakov raglav. It says that Yaakov raised his legs. Nasa libayas raglav, his heart raised his feet. V'nasa kal lelechas, and it was easy for him to go. K'loimer sheyitziv alicha zu ha'is matech simcha, that his going out and his traveling was out of joy. Ad kedei kach shenasa libayas raglav v'nasa kal lelechas, that his heart raised his feet and it became easy to go. And here the Rebbe is going to point out a very obvious thing. The legs are the ones that raise the heart, not the other way around. So he says in the brackets, like an even ordinary person understands, even though in actuality, in the physical sense of the word, the legs raise and carry the heart and the head. What is the cause? What's the motivator for the legs going? The will that's in the brain and the heart. Therefore, when the brain understands and the heart feels the goodness of this going out and this traveling, so then the brain and the heart are carrying the feet, even though physically it's the feet carrying the head. Till it becomes easy and light to go. How come? What made him rejoice? The reason for this is Hashem revealed himself to Yaakov Avinu, and he was told the good news that he was assured that Hashem would protect him. Like it was spoken about earlier in the Farbrengen, that at the beginning, immediately the beginning of the Avodah, right away when he left, he was assured that he would be successful in his avodah. Not only will he return in peace to my father's home, even more so, that the man expanded very, very much. Not only that, he fulfills the intention to make a home for the Eibush down below. Until the ultimate perfection, through the true and complete redemption through Mashiach. So he says in Yud Tes, V'yiratzon should be the will of Hashem. Shekol echad ve'echad yasik b'chol anyanim ha'emurim. Every single one should be involved in all the matters that were above mentioned. Both concerning the spreading the well springs outward, Vehein benegel le'inyan hasimcha b'poil mamish, and also concerning the idea of joy in actuality, ba'ifin shel rechayvus hanar, in a way of broadness of the river. Or b'pashtus, and simply put, lahoisiv b'yasser seisu b'yasser oiz b'chol inyan v'simcha shel Torah v'simcha shel mitzvah, to add and increase so much more in all matters of joy of Torah and a joy of a mitzvah. And then the Rebbe goes on, especially we're standing in the day of Shabbos, that the Rebbe spoke about this earlier in the Farbrengen, the part we skipped, about how Shabbos is also included in the term the days of Simcha. Shabbos Gufo, it's not just any Shabbos, but Parshas Vayetze, Shabon Nemar, Paras Yom Vaked Matzafoin V'Negba. In Parshas Vayetze said you shall burst forth to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. This means to say, in addition to the fact that the Simcha on its own breaks through barriers, in the joy itself that's already breaking barriers, you have to break forth more barriers. Ad kedekach, to such a degree, that all barriers are nullified. Medidas vagbals to kedusha, all the measures and all the boundaries of kedusha, like it says, Parozes teishu Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim will be settled as an open city, no more walled city. Ve'ein inyan yotzim de pshutai. The matter doesn't leave its simple sense. Shema simcha de Shabbos yom simchasem el Shabbos. From the joy of the day of Shabbos, when the Rebbe was saying this Farbrengen, in the day of rejoicing, it's going on Shabbosim. We dance right into the ultimate completion and perfection and joy, Simcha Soilam al Roisham, the everlasting joy upon their heads, Begula Mitzvah Shleimai de Mashiach Tzidkeinu, the true and complete redemption through Mashiach Balgol Dedan Mamish in our time, the way we understand in our time.